110 baud, 10 character per second modem to a central mini computer at the Macomb Intermediate School District, and typed the word run, and the computer came back and clacked out on a roll of paper, because that's the way they used to work in those days, and it said, "Hi, Rich." And I was hooked. I knew what I wanted to do the rest of my days at that point. I wasn't ever much of an artist per se. I'm not sure I have the good fine motor skills that are required. Everything okay? Did I not? I probably didn't hold the button long enough. Sorry about that. So that early touch on computers back in the early 70s as a kid just cemented a view of what my future was going to be. This was going to be my artistic canvas, if you will. And I actually typed in all the Major League Baseball players into the computer in my sophomore year. So you're looking at the guy who created fantasy baseball. And that program won an international programming contest, which actually landed me my first job as a programmer at the Macomb Intermediate School District before I could even drive a car. And I couldn't believe people would pay me to do this thing I loved to do as a hobby. And so I kept working right through high school graduation and created the first email system that Macomb County Schools would ever see. Sorry about that. And then eventually came up here to Michigan to get a formal education in it and launched a career that, by all external measures, looked perfect. Every year, raises, promotions, stock options, greater title, greater authority. I was climbing this beautiful career ladder that my parents were very proud of. My wife was very happy with me. I was providing well for my family. But there was a far more important line, and it was here. And by my mid-30s, I didn't even want to be in the industry anymore. I wanted out. I wanted to get as far away from the industry as I could. I was contemplating an escape route. I had it pretty well planned in my head. I was going to start a canoe camp in the boundary waters of Minnesota. My wife laughs the same way you guys just did. And we have 3 daughters, and she always looks at me and says, "Did you really think the girls and I would follow you to the boundary waters?" But if any of you are familiar with that area of the country, I'd done a lot of canoeing up in Quetico Provincial Park, which is the Canadian side of the boundary waters. And it's about as far away from technology as you can get. So metaphorically speaking, I wanted to get so far away from the industry. And so there I was, career success, everything the world measures the success I had, and heart was down here. So what was going on was, it's so typical in the software industry and many others as well. It isn't like we've cornered the market on misery. There was chaos coming in the door every day, with firefighting galore, phones ringing off the hook with problems, late, long days, sometimes all-nighters. I'd come home after very long days. My wife would look at me and say, "Honey, you look really tired. Did you get a lot done today?" And I'd be like, "No, I got nothing done." I was busy from one end of the day to the other, but got absolutely nothing done. And people yelling in meetings and all that kind of stuff. And then we'd try and fix it with bureaucracy. And so you go from the land of never getting anything done to, quite frankly, the land of never getting started. And so there I was, vacillating between chaos and bureaucracy, and that's where my heart was breaking. And I thought, if those who know me well, my business card says chief storyteller, so you'll get a few stories today. But if there was more room on my business card, the team would probably put chief optimist. And so I was stuck in a room full of manure, and I was determined to find the pony. I knew there had to be a pony in that room somewhere. And so my journey out led me to authors and books, but not books on technology. What I realized was the technical part is actually trivial compared to how to organize the human beings. And that's really where my journey took me. I read a lot of books like Tom Peters' In Search of Excellence and Peter Drucker's books on management and so on. They were all telling me there was a better way of doing things, but they didn't tell me how. That was like left as an exercise to the reader. And so I kept searching, trying to figure things out. I tried a lot of things. Sometimes I would get a little bit optimistic again, and my heart would go up, but eventually I'd get into despair again. But in 1999, I had what Franz Johansson, has a book of this name, calls a click moment, where suddenly all became clear. And I was a VP at that point, so I'd climbed the career ladder up to that point for a company on the west side of Ann Arbor called Interface Systems, and I changed everything about the way that company works, and essentially got the opportunity over a 2-year period between 1999 and 2001 to prototype what Menlo would eventually become. Now, I didn't know that's what I was doing. I assumed I'd be there forever, but we had reinvented the way software was developed at that time. And it was kind of an interesting career moment for me because we had got a new boss in town, Bob Nero. He was the CEO of Interface, and he had rooted his way around the organization, kept asking people, who should I be talking to? Who are the leaders here? And they kept pointing them to me. And I was still in my trough of disillusionment. I was still in my despair. I was still hiding. I was literally taking the longest possible drives to work. You know, usually when you get a route to work, you find like the most efficient route. And for me, it was, get on I-94, get off at Zeeb Road, go to Jackson Plaza. And now I was like going down Liberty till it turned into dirt, and driving 5 miles past Interface Systems, seeing the little steepled churches and the cow pastures and the sheep and all that sort of thing. And then I finally realized, well, Rich, you do have to go to work eventually. So I'd turn around and I'd come back and I'd go to work, and then I'd leave as early as possible. And I was one of the leaders. I was one of the top performers in the company, and I didn't want to be there. And so Bob rooted around, found me, offered me this opportunity to elevate to a VP, and I told him no. I said I was not interested in the uncapped personal commitment required of an executive at a troubled public company. And he got really upset with me. And that night I went home, I contemplated what he was offering me. I contemplated that little kid joy I had. And I went back the next day and I said, Bob, I will take the job on one condition, which was an interesting thing to say given he'd thrown me out of his office yelling at me the night before. And he said, what's the condition? And I said, I need your help. I want to build the best damn software team that this town has ever seen. And he looked at me, he said, what happened last night? He says, last night you're telling me you don't want the job, and now you're coming back with this? And I said, well, Bob, I've wanted this opportunity my entire career. I think there's a better way of doing things, and I'm determined to find it. I'm not sure exactly where I'm going with this, but I'm going to give it the best shot I can, but I need your support. And he did. He is one of my best friends to this day. I would say everything I've accomplished in my life couldn't have been done without his gentle hand on my shoulder every now and then. When I would, because making big changes in any company is hard. And whenever I felt like I can't do it, he would just be there and he'd say, Rich, I got you covered. Keep going, you're doing the right thing. And I just needed to hear that. That little bit of encouragement was incredible. So we reinvented the public company, and then the internet bubble burst. And suddenly everything I had was taken away. Job, title, authority, stock options went to zero, paycheck now gone. I went home and told my wife I'd lost my job. Matthew 6:24, who by worrying can add a single hour to their life, was the Bible passage I pulled out because she had tears in her eyes, and she said, you're unemployed? And I said, no, honey, I'm an entrepreneur now. Remember, Chief Optimist, took her 6 months to figure out that entrepreneurship actually pays less than unemployment. And so we launched Menlo because, again, I had lost everything when the internet bubble burst, save one thing. They couldn't take away what I had learned in those 2 years. And what I had learned was you can throw the chaos and bureaucracy picture away entirely and replace it with a different mental model for how to lead a human organization. And the metaphor I use nowadays is one of the forces that work on an airplane. If you think about airplanes and what gets them off the ground, even if you don't have a pilot's license like I do, you probably have a basic understanding of how planes work. You know, lift, created by the camber of the wing, the weight is trying to pull it down, the thrust is pulling it forward, and the drag is trying to hold it back. So the analog for me in a human organization is probably one of the most squandered energy forces on the planet is the lift of human energy. You know, we waste that every day. How do we know this? Well, the Gallup Group measures human organizations decade in and decade out, and it says that 60 to 70% of people are disengaged at work. This is a tragedy of leadership. The weight that holds it down, weight of bureaucracy, meeting load. I often get to speak inside of very large organizations, and I torture them with this little sarcasm. I tell them, if you want to suck all the human energy out of your organization, it's a simple 3-step process. Number 1, have lots of meetings. Number 2, do not, under any circumstances, make any decisions in those meetings. And number 3, if perchance by mistake you happen to make a decision, that's okay, just don't act on it. And you will pull all the life out of your organization. The thrust that pulls us forward is the thrust of purpose. And the drag that holds us back is the drag of fear. And, you know, fear is so prominent in corporations. I feel like if I went to Ross and took a bunch of business school classes, there must be 3 or 4 of them that teach you how to try and motivate people with fear. I mean, I don't know how it could be so prevalent in corporations if they're not actually teaching you how to do this at a business school. I mean, maybe they're not, but I tend to hang around with the people at the Center for Positive Organizations at Ross, which is its own crazy optimistic group. You know, fear is so prominent. And the purpose part is important, and I think this is probably what brings people like this together in a group. When I talk about purpose, I ask corporations, companies, departments, teams to think about 2 fundamental questions. Who do you serve? And what would delight look like for them? And when I ask them those questions, I say, take your standard stakeholders off the table. When you think about who do you serve, I don't want you to tell me your customers, your employees, or shareholders, because of course you have to serve them. But that is still self-serving. The kind of purpose that pulls us through tough times, like a strong airplane engine would pull you through tough weather, is an externally focused purpose that's making some positive benefit in the world beyond the normal business stakeholders. So for Menlo, we have a big mission. We want to end human suffering in the world as it relates to technology. That's a big mission. Can't do it by ourselves, so we share what we've learned with others. We get between 3,000 and 4,000 people a year who travel from all over planet Earth just to come see how Menlo works. For us, the suffering we really want to end is for the end users of the software. All of us are tortured by software somewhere in our lives. You will be tortured today by software, something that doesn't work the way you want it to, the way you expect it to. It'll lose some data. You know, you'll forget to press the right button and all your stuff will be lost or something like that. And the fact matter is it doesn't have to be that way. If we honor the humans we intend to serve, which we do, we have a team of people at our company that we call high-tech anthropologists, and their job is to go out in the world and study the people we intend to serve and learn about them, learn their vocabulary, their habits, their goals as human beings, and build that into the design of the software our team will create. These kind of externally focused purposes will get you where you want to go, get your team excited about where you're going. And just to give you a couple of examples, we had a life insurance company come and visit us, and I asked them, who do you serve? And they said, well, our policyholders, of course. I said, okay, I get it, and I'm not here to tell you don't serve them, but I'm pretty sure when your life insurance product is the most valuable, the person you're talking about has passed away. And they're like, oh yeah, you're right. I guess it's the beneficiaries of the policy that we're really serving. People who don't pay you for what you do. people you don't even know till a moment of a hard truth after a life well lived, and people, when they call you, expect to be able to share a life story and have a shoulder to cry on. And I'm saying this to this group of executives from a life insurance company. One of the execs, a woman, I can see the tear rolling down her face. And I said, what's going on? She said, Rich, we just outsourced our claims department to an offshore firm with the simple instructions: prevent fraud. So the person you're talking about us serving, we're first going to treat like a potential criminal long before we give them a shoulder to cry on. And they left convicted that they had made a terrible mistake, and they went away and changed it. So again, these questions are easy to ask, but they're not as easy to answer as you think. But ultimately, we created this entire organization that's very different. If you do have a chance to come see it, we do public tours once a month. You can come visit, you can come see it. And what you'll see is unusual. Number one, everyone's working 2 people, 1 computer. Pairs are assigned, and we switch them every 5 working days. Can you imagine that? 2 introverted programmers sharing a keyboard and a mouse all day long, talking to each other. In a big open room, no walls, offices, cubes, or doors. We live in one of those vilified open office environments you hear about. The kind Fast Company magazine calls an idea born in the mind of Satan in the deepest caverns of hell. And, you know, the pandemic was interesting. I'm happy to talk about our adjustment during the roughly 3 years of the pandemic, but we are largely back in the office now. And people find that remarkable, that we were able to pull that off. And wasn't particularly, it should have been easier, it seemed to me, given our history, but we've been doing this for almost 22 years now. And so what you feel when you walk into Menlo is the human energy of the team, because everyone's in conversation all day long with their pair partner, and they're sitting shoulder to shoulder to shoulder to shoulder in a big open room. In fact, this would be a very comfortable environment for us to do our work, just the way we were sitting here. So you can imagine 2 people sitting here, next to 2 people sitting here, across from 2 people sitting here, all working collaboratively, and then every 5 business days we are switching these pairs. So everyone's building a relationship with one another. Everybody's getting to know one another. And that changes a whole bunch of things, particularly how we interview, how we onboard, how we promote, how we give feedback. Maybe a couple of other interesting parts of Menlo that make us somewhat fascinating to the world. We don't have bosses, and we don't have an HR department. And so, or everybody's a boss and everybody's in HR, and we don't have a sales team. And particularly, you know, and we just had our best year ever last year, so something's working. And so let me pause there and just see if I've already generated any questions. I'm happy to just go in any direction you want. I have a couple other key stories I want to share about purpose and about joy, but I want to just make sure I haven't pulled too far away from the crowd here. Just goes like this. You do that, and yep, there we go.
You talked about that day we lost it all, as you said, and you thought about Matthew in the verse there.
Yep. I didn't just think about it. I actually, when my wife was crying, I went and got the Bible, I opened it up, I read her the passage just to try and reassure her. Because you know, the relationship with my wife, and she works at Menlo. In fact, Menlo probably works a lot more because of her than me, but she often wants me to just look her in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay. That's my job, just to say it's going to be okay, and then make it okay. Yeah. Yeah, and I will simply say, I don't know how you could possibly do entrepreneurship without a prayer life. There are so many unknowns. There were so many things I had to learn during those times, and there were so many challenges when you're starting. We started the company in the depth of the dot-com bubble burst, right? And here we are starting an IT services firm when everyone was telling us it's hard to imagine this today, but in 2001, all conventional wisdom, and people were telling us this at Menlo, there will never be a need for another programmer in the United States ever, because all of that work is going offshore. Can you imagine that? I mean, and you watch the statistics like at U of M in the computer science department, and the parents were listening, and the enrollments plunged in the computer science department. Now they can't figure out how to handle all the students going into that profession. But back then it was like, nope, it's all going offshore. It's going to be $5 an hour programmers in sub-Saharan Africa or something like that, and that's how it was going to work. So yeah, that was a big challenge. And then 9/11 happened, and then 2 wars, and then 2008 and 2020, and all these kind of things. So you kind of keep looking for the sky to fall, and I would say that there is lots of times where I sort of wake up maybe in the middle of the night with a little bit of anxiety, and that might go on for 2 or 3 nights, and then finally I feel the knock that says, hey, did you remember to pray about this? I'm like, oh yeah, I don't have to do this alone, do I? And so, I can remember a particular challenging time where we were moving. We just moved, but this was our first big move. We went from a month-to-month lease to the top floor of Carytown, which felt like a really big move because we were signing a 6-year lease. But that's okay. We had this great big customer that was paying us lots of money. We had another big customer that was just about to sign on board. It all felt like everything was going great until our key sponsor at our big customer called me and said he'd been fired, and that $100,000 of invoices wasn't going to get paid. Wow, that hurt. But that's okay, because this other big project was coming. And that same day, the key sponsor of that project called me and said the meeting to set up, get the contract signed was canceled because he'd been fired. And the guy, his boss, never returned our calls. And we had just bought a little company at that point in time. And I remember sitting on a park bench near Carytown. We were about to move in. We'd signed a lease already. And the 3 co-founders were sitting there saying, are we still in? Do we want to keep going? Because we could shut it down right now, and it'd be a nice clean exit right now. And it took us about 5 seconds, and just said, nope, we're still in. And quite frankly, I don't even know, looking back on that time, how we made it through that. But we did. And but yeah, a lot of prayer at times like that, for sure. Yeah, maybe I should say, none of what we've tried to do or have done over the past 22 years has been easy. What it is it's important. The joy part for us isn't, so let me distinguish in particular joy from happiness. Because a lot of people hear joy, and Google often probably, people, I know this is being recorded, so I should be But I've had people from Google tell me that when they come visit Menlo, they tell me this is what people think Google is like. And I don't know exactly what they're telling me when they say that, but they see something different at Menlo. And there's things we do not have. We don't have ping pong tables. We don't have beanbag chairs. We don't have foosball tables. We have none of that stuff. We just go in and we work. And but the joy thing is interesting. And the way I actually pulled up an excerpt from the book that says joy and happiness are not the same. Joy is the deep satisfaction you get from, for example, from successfully training for and completing a marathon. If you've ever watched somebody hit, and I haven't done it, so I can't relate to this. How many of you have ever run a marathon or anything like it? Okay. Yeah, I knew there'd be some crazy people in this crowd. When you hit that line, that finish line, I'm guessing the last thought in your mind is happiness. It's probably relief, but there's this elation of, I did it. Probably the first time is amazing. And that's joy. Joy is, and I've had this experience twice now, joy is watching your daughter marry the man of her dreams. knowing that all the exhausting work of parenting is expressed in a simple I do. And joy is the feeling a fighter pilot gets when, after all the training and preparation, she lands an F-18 on the deck of an aircraft carrier in rough seas, strong winds, and low visibility. Once the engine is quiet and the wheels secured, she knows that the aircraft, the carrier, the flight deck team, and she are all safe and sound. She can't wait to do it again. There's nothing easy about joy, but I think we are built for this. I believe this is how God created us. And it's amazing how much of that is blocked inside of most of our work lives. And it was for me for a long time. My life is almost perfectly divided now in my work life between the trough of disillusionment days and Menlo. And I can tell you that I feel very, very blessed to have achieved what we've done at Menlo over the last 22 years. And it was a personally selfish journey. I needed this. I wanted to build a place I wanted to come to work every day. I wanted the human energy, the camaraderie, the teamwork, the kind of accomplishments we do as a company, and I wasn't getting that. You know, there's a lot of people in the software industry who work for decades on things and they never see the light of day. And, you know, the way I describe joy in the software industry, there is only one thing that actually lifts the heart of an engineer, any kind of engineer, and that is to see their work get out into the world and delight the people it's intended to serve so much that those people come back to you and tell you, I love that thing you created. You made my life better for what you did. And a lot of engineers don't get that opportunity to see that. Their projects get canceled, they get delayed, they get delivered, and they frustrate people, all that kind of stuff. It is very, actually rare to get that kind of feedback, and we get that all the time at Menlo because we created a different system. There's crazy boundaries we have. We don't work overtime, ever. Now that's a little bit of hyperbole. There will be team members who every once in a while might work 44 or 45-hour weeks, something like that. We never work weekends. When you go on vacation, we essentially through peer pressure alone, we cut you off electronically from the company. So you are forbidden from checking email while you're away, and we will chastise you when you come back if we've caught you doing that. Which drives the spouses of our team members crazy because they go, like I was just in the Bahamas. Now, I'll admit, I probably need to subscribe to that rule more, but by and large, I was away from the office for the last week, and I didn't completely cut myself off, but I will tell you, I did get chastised by one of the team members when she caught me checking my email. And so I'm the CEO of the company, and I got a team member telling me, hey, aren't you on vacation? Oh, yeah. But we want you to enjoy the time away. That's a time to refresh. There's a reason we give you that kind of time, because it is good for you and it's good for the business, right? And so, and we do other unusual things, maybe not that unusual. Dogs are common in the office, and dogs bring joy, no question, and babies. We have this, I'll just share the bigger story. We have this fundamental line at Menlo that says, run the experiment. So one way to defeat a meeting-based culture is to switch from take a meeting to take action. And our take action phrase is when somebody brings up a new idea, rather than defeat it and say, well, that's not the way we do things here, that's against policy, you know, we tried that 10 years ago, it didn't work then, it won't work now, which is typically how ideas die. Our answer is, oh, that's an awesome idea, let's run the experiment. Let's try it and see what happens, instead of defeating it. And 15 years ago now, one of our key experiments, Tracy had little Maggie. She took her months of maternity leave. She was ready to come back to work. She came to me and told me how excited she was to join this new project we had. And I said, great, how soon can you be back? And she said, well, says, the daycare we plan to put Maggie in is full. Grandparents live too far away to help. And she said, we don't know what to do. I don't know how I'm going to get back to work. And in that moment, there was a screaming match in my brain that Tracy never heard. You know, the bright voice, dark voice screaming match. The dark voice said, don't you dare say what you're about to say. HR will not like you. The lawyer's a freak. The insurance policies go through the roof. The bright voice said, it's your company. You can do whatever you want. You don't even have an HR department. And so I resolved the argument in my brain, and then I looked at Tracy, and I said, bring her in. She looked at me and said, what do you mean, bring her in? I said, bring her into work. She said, all day? I said, sure. She said, every day? Now, she was testing to see if I'd thought this through, and of course the answer was no. I said, yeah, why not? She looked around the big open room, remember this big, and this was not an offer, we're going to build a daycare, this was the baby's going to be with the parent. And she said, Rich, where will I put her? I said, Tracy, she's 3 months old, she's not going anywhere. Just put her in a front pack and a pack and play in a car seat, a swing, whatever. She says, what if she makes a fuss? I said, here it's like a noisy restaurant, you'll never hear her. She said, come on, you've raised 3 girls. What if she makes that big baby fuss? It'll destroy the ambiance of the whole place. The team will hate me. And I said, Tracy, you're the mom. I trust you. You'll do the right thing. We'll work it out together. Let's run the experiment. That was 29 Menlo babies ago. We were literally having 2 babies a year. Pretty regular and consistent basis. George and his wife just had their 2nd child, little Joel. And Joel's probably a month old now, but George is going to bring him in work. He brought Elsie into work. So this has been a wonderful thing. You want to bring human energy in a room, have babies in a room. And, lots of fun stories with babies. I'm happy to share the fun things that happen that are different and unexpected with babies. And I would say, when you run experiments, especially if it involves little humans, expect the unexpected. Team has learned that when I'm leading tours, I've got a deep voice and warm hands. If it's near nap time and I'm leading a tour, the team will just walk up to me and say, hey, Rich, I think you only need 1 arm for the tour. Could you hold a baby? You know, you'll put them to sleep, which apparently what I probably do all the time with people when I talk. And so sure enough, there I am leading a tour with a baby in my arms, and not unusual. And I remember one time, little Elsie had a post-it note on put a post-it note on my computer. I think she had help from Mom. And it said, Dear Mr. Rich, I'm really sorry I threw up in your shoes during the tour yesterday. Yeah, and again, I want to be very careful. We do things a particular way at Menlo, and there's no way I would expect others to do like we do. We do it for a whole bunch of reasons. But what I would say is this idea of trying stuff versus waiting for permission. So I collect stories about this because I see it out in the world, and then when I see it, I'm like, oh, that's a good story to share with people. So one of my favorite little stories is I have a weakness, and typically just at Detroit Metro Airport. It's a McDonald's quarter pounder with cheese, large fry, and a Coca-Cola at the McDonald's in the McNamara terminal. And I'm busy, I travel a lot, and just like a tractor beam, it pulls me in for that meal before I go. And every time I was there was this guy named Mike. He's an older guy. How did I know his name was Mike? Because this McDonald's badge said Mike. And he was there, and I watched him while I was sitting there eating my meal, and he was hustling around that restaurant, cleaning the tables, picking up everything us busy, careless travelers left behind. And every time Mike got near me, he'd come up to me and go, how's it going? Have a safe flight. Can I get you anything? Can I get you a napkin? Every single time I was there, and I thought, wow, they are so lucky to have Mike. I mean, where does this guy get his energy, right? And then one day Mike was off shift and I was in the restaurant, and this young kid is pulling a sled full of garbage out of the back of the restaurant heading off to the dumpster. And as he gets by my table, he leans and he says, how's it going? Have a safe flight. Can I get you anything? Can I get you a napkin? And I'm like, phew. I thought to myself, what on earth is going on at this McDonald's? This is one of the most relationless restaurants on the planet, inside of one of the most relationless places on the planet, an international airport, right? And these guys are doling out kindness and napkins? So I went up to Derek, the manager, who's still there, by the way. This is like 10 years that Derek's been there, and at least that I know of. And I thanked him, and he thanked me for noticing. He said, hey, Rich, this is a highly competitive environment. We got to compete with Plum Market across the way. Anything we can do to try and get an edge, we're going to try. And I thought about it, and I thought, because again, this goes to the heart of the question. I'm pretty sure Derek didn't go to McDonald's corporate and say, hey, guys, could you form a committee to write a policy on doling out kindness and napkins? No, he just did it. And the beautiful part is, it was free. I never even asked for a napkin, ever. And so I always tell people, because here's what happens, especially in a large organization, and this can happen in the world. All the troubling things we read about in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or MLive or anything like that, and we say, oh gosh, there's just so much trouble. There's so many things wrong. Where would I begin? Well, I'll tell you where you begin. Start right where you are. You don't have to change the world. You just have to change your world. Become the change you want to see in the world. Derek has no idea how famous I've made him. People in Singapore and Tokyo and Berlin and Paris know about Derek, the manager of McDonald's. Sometimes I run into him and I'm like, hey, Derek, I'm still telling your story. And he's like, what do you mean? He has no idea how often I've told his story around the world. And I don't know if it survives past Derek, but this is the opportunity we have. And the other part is too often change, any kind of change we want to see in an organization, we will sit in our spot and we'll say, man, for example, a talk like I'm giving today, maybe some of you are thinking to yourself, man, I really wish my boss was here to hear this. Or, there's somebody in my no, you need to hear this message. I needed to hear this message. Change has to start in here. And for me, it happened back in 1997 when I brought my 8-year-old daughter, Sarah, in to work with me. It was one of these take your child to work days that Ann Arbor Public Schools has. I don't know if they still do that or not, but back then it was like, take your child to work and they'll get excited about the work world and pursue a career of their own and all this kind of stuff. And so I had just become the VP, and so I'm taking my 8-year-old daughter to watch the VP work all day. Can you imagine a more boring day for an 8-year-old? What is she going to walk out? My dad does email all day long. I can't wait to get into the work world. So, she wisely brought her coloring books, crayons, and stickers, and she sat at my task table doing her work while I did mine. And I knew what this was all about for her. She got a day off of school. There wasn't going to be any learning going on here, right? Well, at the end of the day, I thought, well, I better ask her before, she goes back to school and the teacher does. I said, so Sarah, what did you learn today? She's 8. She looks at me and she said, what I learned, Dad, is you're really important here. I said, what? She said, yeah, what I saw is nobody here can make a decision without asking you first. Oh. She was very proud. I was instantly mortified because I'm realizing that in that simple sentence, she convicted me. I had created a hero-based organization, and I was the #1 hero. The only way to scale a hero-based organization is to scale the heroes. The only way to scale the heroes is overtime. And I'm looking across the table at this 8-year-old thinking to myself, I don't want to miss the best parts of being a dad. So in that moment, I realized the change had to begin in here. I had to become a different kind of leader. I had to figure out how to export my hero-based leadership to a team-based approach. And that began a journey for me. And so my simple answer is start inside, start with the people around you. It becomes infectious. I mean, we're a tiny little company in one little office at the corner of Liberty and Division. And we get 3,000 to 4,000 people a year travel from all over the planet to spend anywhere from a day to a week with us. And that makes changes, big changes. Mass Mutual Corporation, 180-year-old life insurance company. I gave a talk there, much like I'm giving a talk today. And Amy Ferrero, the VP of Claims, which they process about $3 billion a year in claims, so Amy was in charge of that group. She did something nobody had ever done before. She invited me back 6 months later. She had taken the message of run the experiment, took it to heart, ran experiments, and she wanted to show me what had happened. Oh, that's pretty cool. I usually don't get to see after effects. She said, Rich, we're going to go visit the claims department, this 100,000 square foot facility of half-height cubicles. And she says, when we turn the corner, you're going to see helium balloons. And I said, oh, what are you celebrating? She says, nope, everywhere there's a desk with a helium balloon taped to it is the person at that desk declaring, I'm running an experiment, come talk to me about it. We turned the corner and there were balloons as far as the eye could see. This was in 6 months inside of a 180-year-old, $30 billion a year life insurance company. If they can do it, I often ask at conferences, like, how many of you work at companies that are more than 180 years old? And I had one guy raise his hand once. I said, where do you work? He says, the U.S. Postal Service. I'm like, okay. Ben Franklin, yeah, okay, yeah, all right. And I don't know if I can help the Postal Service, but but the fact of the matter is that Amy made these changes within 6 months. She didn't ask for permission. She was a leader, but she wasn't a top leader. And I ran up to Susan's desk. I said, Susan, tell me about your experiment. She says, well, I'm in charge of quality before the checks go out. I'm the last stop. I got to do a 3-step process, A, B, and C. The trouble is if I find an error at step C, I have to go back and redo step B. That's the longest part of the process. The order doesn't matter. So I changed the order from A to C to B. I thought, well, that sounds pretty easy. And she's just beaming with energy. I said, Susan, how long have you worked here? She says, 19 years. I said, have you always been like this? And her face turned into a scowl. She said, no, I hated my job before. I hated the drive into work. I was counting the days to retirement. Couldn't stand my job. I said, what's different now? She says, now we can run experiments. I said, what was it like before? She says, in the past, you had to go up 5 levels, over, down 5 levels, and back again. She said, every idea I ever had died on the vine. And after a while, she said, you just stop bringing ideas to work. After a while, you say to yourself, you know what, I'll find my joy elsewhere in life. After a while, you declare it's just a job. I'll count the days to retirement, start taking long drives into work and all that kind of stuff. She says, now I love my job. She says, I don't even think about retirement anymore. And I'm looking across this room, and there are balloons as far as the eye could see. Think about it. Same people, same paychecks, same capital equipment. Huge difference in human energy. Lighten up that bureaucratic workload. Take action versus take a meeting. Help people create a mindset of run the experiment, and you unleash the human potential. Right? And so, for me, as I look at how God built us, I think there are 3 fundamental elements of truth around us humans. Number one, we are built to work. We are literally formed to work. And quite frankly, to work hard. Not work to exhaustion, but we're built to work. We are built to work with others. We are collaborative. We are relational. We want to be with other people. And number 3, we are built to work on something bigger than ourselves. And if we can hit those 3 things together inside of a workplace, we will achieve, I think, what our Creator made us to do. And so, that's, and the service to other part. A lot of people ask me about the joy. They ask me where the joy comes from for me. And I used to think it was technological. I used to think of that little kid typing the 2-line program into the computer. And I realized that wasn't it. I had to go back further in my life. I went back to the 10-year-old version of me. my parents had bought an equivalent of an IKEA bookshelf, and in a box. Back then, IKEA wasn't, it was probably in business, but it wasn't selling in the United States. And my mom wanted it in the living room. And it was a big deal to get a new piece of furniture for my parents back in those days. And so they went out to dinner and movie. I was left at home on my own, which was fine. And I went out, I thought to myself, I'm going to build that bookshelf for them. And I went out in the garage and I put it all together. It was, my mental image, this is 8 feet wide and 6 feet tall. And, so it was a big deal. It was like 50 pieces of wood and 200 little nuts, bolts, and screws. Follow the instructions. And I built this thing. I was so proud of myself. And then I thought, oh no. Mom wants it in the living room. I built it in the garage. So then I start inching this thing out the front of the garage, down the sidewalk, through the kitchen, into the living room, put it right where Mom wants it. My 10-year-old memory says I didn't harm it a bit in that little transport as I dragged it over the cement. Set up Dad's books, Mom's knickknacks, wired up the stereo, and when they walked in the door, I had my mom's favorite album playing on the record player, and she cried. Joy. Joy is serving others. And if we can remember that, I think we get to a far different place in our hearts and our minds and our workplaces than we've ever been before. Yep.
I'm just curious about your statement about how, we're meant to work, and that's an ideal state. I think, a lot of us often think retirement is that way,
Yeah.
and that's the kind of the philosophy.
Yep.
I can do what I want, I can play tennis, I can hang out with my kids more, all that. So how do you kind of think about those two, maybe at odds, or?
Funny you should mention that. I turned 65 this past year, which, traditionally 65 is, you should retire. And there's no question I want to spend more time doing, spending time with grandkids and family and that sort of thing. But, for me personally, I have trouble with this idea of stopping work and doing something else. I don't know. It doesn't quite make sense to me. And I don't know if that would change if I literally stopped. But my old boss, Bob Nero, who I talked about, gentle hand on my shoulder, he's retired down in Florida now. He's about 10 years older than me or so. And Bob looked at me when I was down there the last time talking with him. He says, "Don't do it." He goes, there's lots of things you can continue to do, Rich. He says, down here, I refer to myself as a pip. I said, "A what?" He says, "A pip, a previously important person." So yeah, I wrestle with that. I don't have a strong answer. Check in with me in 10 years, see how I'm doing. I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
That's interesting because I was recently laid off and I've had a few months to just do what I want. The weather's warming up and I want to golf, tennis, and I do feel like something is missing. I kind of just get back to it. So I used this time as like an A/B test to see if I would actually enjoy retirement, whatever that might be. And I would say there is still something I need to work through about
Yeah.
having, really all this time left in retirement.
Yeah, I mean, and I can imagine I would find something to make a contribution to society. I think there's probably a part of me that identifies my self-worth with what impact am I making on the world? And it could be inside of a nonprofit, it could be helping kids, it could be doing all kinds of stuff. It doesn't have to necessarily be CEO of Menlo, that sort of thing. Yes?
Thanks, Rich, again, for coming. This is
You
super
bet.
interesting. A lot of the world ends up in the other way if we are a person.
Mm-hmm.
They don't intend to. It just kind of is the natural way that they
Yep.
end up. I'm curious, what process have you put in place around making a decision or support structure to continue to decide to do it differently? 15 times a day to continue to decide to do things differently.
I think probably it becomes a habit after a while. This idea of encouraging people just to adopt this experimental mindset, to just let's try stuff and see how it works. There's a lot of things that we do that don't work out. And And I just, my view of leadership was well formed in my head. I probably never realized quite how well formed it was. But my father was really good at putting books in my hand when I was a kid. And one of the books he put in my hand was Aesop's Fables. The sour grapes and the tortoise and the hare and that sort of thing. For whatever reason, the story that really stuck with me was the story of the north wind and the sun. And it's a little less well-known story in Aesop's Fables, but the north wind and the sun got into an argument about who was stronger. And so they're arguing with each other, and they see this weary traveler walking across a field with a coat on. And the wind says, "Tell you what, let's see who can get the coat off the weary traveler." And the sun says, "Cool, I'll back off, you go first." Sun disappears behind the clouds, north wind comes out and starts blowing and blowing and blowing as hard as he could. And the weary traveler, all he did was grab his coat and hold it tighter and tighter, and the wind blew harder, and the harder the wind blew, the tighter the guy held his coat. And the wind eventually ran out of, energy and couldn't do it. Sun says, "Let me give it a try." Clouds part, sun comes out, kind of like a day like today. Weary traveler gets warm, peels off his coat. I think, for me, that is a metaphor for leadership. And how can we encourage through gentleness, not through blowing hard at people, not through fear-based management? How can we encourage people to express what they want to do while considering the whole? I mean, that's an important balancing act. It isn't about every person for themselves, but how can they start caring about each other? And so we have these very unusual interviewing events. We call them extreme interviewing because extreme programming is what taught us about pairing. And so we pair people during the interview process. We just did one last night with 40 programmers, 40 candidates. So we get 40 people to come in to interview with us in one night. We did it last night. We pair them one with another, 2 candidates. And we say, your job is to help him get a second interview. Help your pair partner succeed. If he's struggling, help him out. If you know the answer, give it to him. Make your pair partner look good. And we switch the pairs 3 times in the course of the evening. So now it's not the 2 of you, it's the 2 of you, and then it's the 2 of you, and so on. We do that 3 times, send them home, don't ask any questions. But what are we really doing? We're teaching our culture. Your job is to help support another human being. Your job is to help the person sitting next to you succeed. By establishing that as a intentional cultural norm, that your job is to help others, and that gets reinforced. And let me tell you, we had 40 people there last night. 20 Menlonians are watching the 20 pairs. And then they talk about what they saw later. After all the candidates go home, we talk about what we saw and we vote based on what we saw. But what's interesting about it for me is, having watched this for 22 years, because we've been hiring like this actually for 24 years, back at Interface we established this practice, is the conversation that happens amongst our team members about the candidates is really a conversation they're having with themselves about their own expectations for each other. And that's a really powerful component of Menlo. How do you bind people together as a team? How do you get the kind of teamwork most people yearn for but never actually achieve? And a lot of it has to do with the breaking of the mold around individual achievements, which is how most annual performance reviews are geared. So you can talk, 249 business days a year, I'm just doing 50 times 5, about teamwork and collaboration and trust, and then there's the one day of the annual performance review, and it's all about what are your individual achievement awards. And the only way you can get ahead is to exceed expectations, and only 3.7% of you can exceed expectations. I don't know how they come up with these numbers, and which means then you don't have to get better, you just have to do better than the person sitting next to you, which means you're going to try and hold them back so you can look better. We have a famous poster at our company that from the group out in Salt Lake City called Vital Smarts. It says, your organization is perfectly designed to create the behaviors you're currently experiencing. That's the bad news. You're doing it to yourselves. The good news is you can change it. And that inspires me to keep going.
But
You bet.
This is amazing. This is encouraging. Thank you for sharing that, not only the joy, but your faith and what that has meant during this time. I'll maybe just close us in prayer.
Yeah.